Today, we are undertaking a deep dive into Genesis chapter 3. And this isn't just, a historical story.
No, not at all.
This is arguably the single most important foundational text for understanding ourselves. It's the story we all call the fall.
It truly is. It's the ultimate paradigm. The sources we have treat this chapter not as some simple anecdote, but really as the archetype.
A model story.
The model story, exactly, that explains the origin, the nature, and, well, the vast consequences of disorder on Earth. And the interesting thing is the word sin never even appears in the chapter.
That's right. So our mission is to really analyze this bedrock narrative. And I think we have to start with the context. What was the original state that was shattered here?
Well, the initial state was perfection. God created everything and called it very good. Humans are in Eden, they have free will, and the text says they were naked without shame.
And that phrase, without shame, that's so key, isn't it?
It's everything. It points to this pristine, innocent state of total dependence and unbroken fellowship with God. Everything was in perfect balance.
And then it was all shattered, just gone, in the space of one single conversation.
Okay, so let's unpack that shattering. Let's start with the antagonist. Who or what is the serpent? And why is it described with that Hebrew word aram, cunning, or crafty?
That cunning nature it's the whole point. To really get the gravity of this, you have to look at the ancient Near Eastern context.
Okay.
Serpents weren't just, animals. They were widely recognized symbols of chaos, of evil, of deception. Think of, the monster snakes in other mythologies that are always threatening the divine order.
So this is not just an exceptionally clever snake talking in a garden.
No. It's embodying something much, much bigger. The biblical narrative just sort of presupposes that the reader knows this creature is a medium.
A medium for Satan, the advocate.
Precisely. It represents a spiritual and cosmic disorder that's showing up physically in the garden for one reason, to challenge God's authority. It's chaos trying to destabilize order. And its tactics are so immediate, so calculated. I mean, the conversation starts with that question, did God really say? Why start there with the rule?
That's a great question, because the goal is not just disobedience, it's much deeper. The goal is the destruction of the trust relationship. Satan's primary objective here is to paint a false image of God, to suggest that God is restrictive, that he's jealous, that he's withholding some ultimate good from them.
So if you can make them believe God is a tyrant,
then disobedience becomes the logical next step. It's a direct attack on God's character of love. Once that trust is broken, everything else it follows so easily.
Right. And that leads us to Eve's huge mistake. She actually engages in a dialogue with him.
She does. Instead of fleeing, she talks back. And this is where the sources get really interesting, because you can see her internal trust is already eroding in her reply.
She changes God's command.
She does. She makes these key errors.
Yeah.
She really minimizes the consequence. God said, "You will surely die," and she just says, "You will die."
And she adds something, doesn't she?
Yes. She adds this whole new layer of prohibition. She adds the phrase, "Nor shall you touch it," which is a restriction God never ever placed on them.
So why is adding that touching rule so critical to the serpent's whole strategy?
Because it creates a cognitive trap for her. It's brilliant, in a way. If she sees the serpent touch the fruit, and it's right there tempting her.
And it doesn't die.
And it doesn't die.
Yeah.
So now there's this immediate visible contradiction between what she experiences with her senses and what she thinks God's word is. Her own made-up rule appears false, and her distrust just deepens right before the serpent delivers the knockout blow. "You will not surely die."
Okay, let's pivot to the object itself, the fruit. We have to talk about the apple. This huge cultural assumption that the forbidden fruit was an apple.
It's probably the most persistent symbol of sin in all of Western culture, and yet the Bible, Genesis, never identifies the species.
So what did they think it was originally?
Oh, the early commentators suggested all sorts of things. Figs, grapes, pomegranates, even citrons.
So where in the world did the apple come from? I've heard it has something to do with the Latin word for apple, malum, sounding like the word for evil.
Yeah, that's the popular theory. It sounds neat. But the sources show the linguistic reality is a lot less poetic. It was actually just a simple, almost accidental linguistic shift.
In 12th century France, right?
That's it. Latin authors used the general word pomum for fruit. Its descendant in Old French became pomme, which later became pomme. But over time, that word pomme narrowed its meaning.
From just fruit in general.
To specifically apple. So when later French readers encountered the story, they saw Adam and Eve ate a pomme and naturally thought apple, because that's what the word meant to them.
Wow. So a totally non-theological shift in a common word created one of the most enduring symbols of sin.
That's it. It's a great reminder that the power of the fruit was never botanical, it was always moral.
And speaking of moral, the deception worked perfectly. The serpent sells this act as a gain, promising their eyes would be opened, that they would be like God.
Sin is always presented as mirage of gain. And Eve, she evaluates the fruit on every level. She sees it's good for food, that's the physical, a delight of the eyes, the emotional,
And desirable to gain
and
wisdom.
the spiritual.
Right. She focuses entirely on the promised good, and she completely ignores the inherent evil of disobeying.
And that one act, that attempt to live autonomously and take that knowledge for themselves, that really roots the definition of sin for the rest of the entire biblical story.
Yes. If you synthesize what Genesis 3 is teaching us, the core sin is this move from total dependence to radical autonomy. It's the attempt to be a law for oneself, to reject God's authority.
So if that's the root mistrust and the pursuit of self-rule, how does that then bloom into the broader theological ideas of sin we see everywhere else?
Well, the fundamental concept is unbelief. It's rejecting God's truth and character. That internal rebellion then produces the visible fruit, which is lawlessness, the actual act of breaking the command.
And then it gets passed down. And this is maybe the most devastating part, that one act creates an inherited state. We now inherit a nature that's characterized by selfishness, a propensity toward evil. It's why Seth is later born in Adam's image, not in God's.
The effects are so immediate, so dramatic. They ate the fruit hoping for divine wisdom, but what they got was their eyes opened to shame. What kind of nakedness are we talking about
We're
here?
talking about spiritual nakedness. It wasn't just physical. They suddenly realized their inner guilt, their shame. This is the first circle of alienation, alienation from self.
And their first instinct is to cover up with fig leaves.
That image is so powerful. It's the first human attempt at self-justification. It's righteousness by works. And we're still frantically sowing those fig leaves today, aren't we? Trying to cover our own brokenness.
Which leads right into the second circle, alienation from each other. The horizontal relationship just shatters.
Instantly. When God confronts him, Adam immediately shifts the blame. And listen to how he does it. He doesn't just blame Eve. He takes a direct shot at God.
The woman whom you gave to be with me.
She gave me the fruit. It's brilliant and awful. This refusal to accept responsibility just shatters their solidarity and injects blame into every human relationship from that point forward. And then Eve, of course, blames the serpent.
And then comes the curse on creation itself, the alienation from work and nature.
Right. Work was supposed to be a good thing, part of the design. But now it becomes toilsome, painful, liable to failure. The ground itself is cursed, bringing forth thorns and thistles. The whole effort to reward ratio for life just gets turned upside down.
And the final terrible irony, they lost the very thing they were seeking. They wanted to know good and evil, but instead they suffered this profound loss of discernment.
That's the most heartbreaking part. They already had the capacity to discern and choose good before this happened. Disobedience didn't bring some higher insight. It corrupted their moral judgment, making them prone to love the very evil they now experienced.
And yet, even as all this judgment and curse enters the world, the story pivots immediately. God himself initiates salvation right there in the middle of the disaster.
This is the foundation of hope. It's the ultimate surprise in the story. Genesis 3.15 is what theologians call the proto-evangelium,
The first gospel, the first promise.
the first gospel promise. It sets up the central conflict for the rest of the Bible. God establishes this enmity, this war between the serpent and the woman's offspring, the promised seed.
It sets up the whole cosmic conflict that drives the entire narrative forward.
It does. And the promise has two critical parts. The seed will crush the serpent's head. That's ultimate victory. But in the process, the seed will be bruised in the heel.
A costly victory.
A painful, costly, substitutionary death is required to win that victory.
And we see a picture of that substitution right away in the garden with the clothes. God replaces their flimsy fig leaves with garments of animal skin. Why is that specific trade so theologically vital?
Because it symbolizes God's grace and the absolute necessity of substitutionary atonement. To make those coats, an innocent life had to be taken. An animal had to die to provide a proper covering.
So the covering represents a righteousness they couldn't make for themselves.
Exactly. God provides the garment of righteousness. It emphasizes that we, with our own efforts, cannot fix our brokenness or cover our guilt. The solution has to come from outside of us.
Then comes the final paradoxical act. God kicks them out of Eden, It sounds like the ultimate punishment, but your sources frame this as an incredible act of mercy.
It was absolutely a protective act. They were barred from the tree of life while they were in this corrupted, fallen state. Think about it. If they had eaten from that tree after the fall, they would have become eternal
Just
sinners.
stuck forever.
Exactly. Perpetually fixed in this state of separation and shame and rebellion. The expulsion was a mercy, a way to preserve the possibility of future redemption. So he's just synthesized this whole deep dive for you. What Genesis 3 reveals is the incredibly complex nature of sin. It's not, at its core, an external deed. It's not just breaking a rule.
It's an inner brokenness.
It's an inner brokenness, a fundamental rejection of trust, and this powerful movement toward autonomy, that corrosive desire we all have to define good and evil for ourselves.
So what does this all mean for you listening? The narrative tells us that because we inherited this nature, our own internal freedom is fundamentally compromised. We have this self-centered lean toward autonomy and sin.
And because the problem is so internal, so cosmic, the solution, the real restoration, has to come from outside of us.
Through that promised seed who took the cost, the bruised heel, upon himself. The original story of Adam and Eve was really defined by them accepting limits that were set by their creator. And that was the precondition for true freedom and growth. So, given that sin is the attempt to be autonomous, to unilaterally decide what is good and evil for ourselves, here's something to reflect on. What are the necessary limits or boundaries that you need to respect today in your work, in your relationships, maybe in your spiritual life, to truly cultivate a lasting, meaningful freedom?